Are you sure you're not making a mistake? I just spoken or announced to one of my colleagues that I was about to leave my sell-side job research at Merrill Lynch. This was a polite, euphemistic way of saying to me, "You're out of your mind." Here I was in Mexico City. We were in an auditorium about this size, hundreds of people. Up on the podium was Carlos Slim. He is the controlling shareholder of América Móvil. It was an analyst investor day for that company. He's one of the richest men in the world, and he was referencing my research report and referring to me as La Whitney. At the same time, I had institutional investors, Fidelity, Wellington, reaching out to me saying, "I want to hear what you're thinking. Is it a buy? Is it a sell? Can I see your financial model?" It was really pretty heady stuff. This colleague also knew me when I first arrived at New York. I was a music major. I had no confidence, no connections, and so I got the best job I could get, which was an anchovy at the bottom of the food chain, which was a sales assistant for a retail broker. I was making $21,000 a year. Are you sure you're not making a mistake? Yes, I'm sure. Now, I wouldn't have described it this way then, but today, what I understand is I was saying it's time for me to disrupt myself. Disruptive innovation. As Saul mentioned, it is a term of art that was coined by Clayton Christensen of the Harvard Business School. Many of you are familiar with this term, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but at its simplest, it's an innovation that's low-end or new market that eventually upends an industry. We have one example in the news right now, Netflix. Reed Hastings is trying to disrupt himself. He's behaving badly in the process, but they're trying to disrupt themselves. Let's do something that's a little bit more benign. Where should I be pointing this? Ah, there we go. Oh, well, it's scooping me. That's okay. Let's start with cars. I remember being a young girl, we had this really fabulous GM US car. It wasn't a Cadillac, it was a Buick, and we could put our Easter eggs in the side. It was really very exciting. Toyota then came in on the low end, has moved its way up. Now we have the Koreans coming in, also on the low end, disrupting Toyota, and waiting in the low end wings is China and India's Tata Nano. Companies disrupt companies, and on rare occasions, they have the cannibalistic moxie that Steve Jobs has. But usually, companies disrupt other companies, and people can disrupt their careers and their lives. 6 years into this current iteration of my disrupting myself, I'd like to share with you 4 lessons that I've learned. The first is, if it feels scary and lonely, you're probably on the right track. We talk about disruptive innovation so much, it sounds really very exciting. But the fact is that once we're in the trenches and we're starting to disrupt ourselves, it can be actually quite lonely. Lowly too, but lonely is what I wanted to say. I received a comment from a fellow by the name of Abhishek on my blog, the Harvard Business Review blog. And he said, here's his story. I just graduated from university in India, one of the best schools, engineering major. I've come up with this technology that can be helpful to those who are visually impaired. I thought, I'll patent it, sell it, we'll be done. Well, it turns out the people that I want to sell it to can't afford to buy it. So then I thought, okay, I'll donate it. At this point, all of my well-wishers, my friend and family, they're actually not really well-wishers, they're naysayers, and they're saying to me, you don't need to do this, you've got a good job, why are you going to bother? It's a headache, it's a hassle, are you out of your mind? A year later, he's moving this idea forward, but he wrote in his comment, it's really been quite lonely. It also can be very scary, and I'm not talking about at the beginning of your career. So for me, at the beginning of my career, it's like you're at the bottom waiting to go up the roller coaster. You really don't have much to lose. It may not be very sexy. I remember talking to 2 Ivy League grads, and they're asking me, okay, tell me about your background. And I'm quailing at the prospect of saying to them, well, I came to New York as a music major, then I was a secretary, now I'm an analyst. It was terribly embarrassing, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you're mid-career, you're at this top of this roller coaster, and now you're thinking about changing jobs, losing your standing in your community, and all prospect of financial stability. That could be a thrill ride to zero. It probably won't be, but that's what it feels like. That can be lonely, it can be scary. And so here's what I want you to understand. Some of you may say to me, well, but you had a cushion, you had a cash cushion, you had a really cushy job. But another fellow, Ramesh, commented on my blog. He said, I have 10 years worth of savings in the bank, and yet I still can't muster the courage to make the move. In other words, my experiences that I will share with you today, they may not be applicable to you, but here's what I know about these frameworks. They are a theory of causality, not of correlation, and they have proven predictive power. So look behind my stories to the frameworks and see how they apply to you. Second point. When you're disrupting it yourself, be assured that you have no idea what will come next. By definition, you're looking at a yet-to-be-defined market, and so you can't know the opportunity at the outset. Let me tell you a story about C.K. Woolley. She thought, 2006, she graduates from Columbia in social work with a master's degree. She thinks, I'm going to go abroad, I'm going to work abroad and work in trauma. And then her doctor says to her, you've got medical condition X. You're not going to live abroad, you're not going to work abroad, you can't even keep a regular job. She goes home, she's not one to feel sorry for herself. She starts that discovery-driven planning process that's integral to disruption. And 6 years later, she's the CEO of Shabby Apple, an online retailer, which is on track to generate $1 million this year. My experience, when I left Wall Street in 2005, I was going to write and publish a children's book, fully illustrated. Which hasn't happened, by the way. I also was going to produce a reality TV show on soccer in Latin America. That hasn't happened either. I could not have imagined in a million years that I would end up co-founding a hedge fund with Clayton Christensen. Here's the important thing. When we're on this disruptive path, we can't know what's going to come next, but we're in good company. Some of you may be familiar with Amar Bide. He's a professor at Columbia University. Here's what he said, and here's what I want you to remember. For 90% of all successful new ventures, the strategy that leads to their success is not the strategy that they initially pursued. So again, when you're disrupting yourselves, the one thing you can be sure of is that you don't know what will come next. Point number 3. Throw out the performance metrics that you've always relied on. There's a more textbook example of this, which is measure different performance attributes than the ones in your current value network, but I actually kind of like the way that Billy Beane thinks about this. Some of you know the film Moneyball is coming out tomorrow, and this is a book that was written by the absolutely brilliant Michael Lewis about the Oakland A's, how they were the poorest team in Major League Baseball, and then they became the most successful team. And that's because Billy Beane, the general manager of the A's, decided to recast how he thought about performance metrics. He found this pitcher, Chad Bradford. Chad Bradford had a pretty slow fastball at 81 to 85 miles per hour, and he threw funny. And so the scouts discounted him. Billy Beane didn't have the luxury of discounting him. He was willing to look past conventional metrics because he needed to find players on the cheap. Chad Bradford had a unique metric. He gave up hits like most pitchers do, but when he gave up hits, they were ground balls. His ground ball to fly ratio was 5 to 1 compared to 1.1 to 1 in the league. Ground balls, as you know, you baseball fans, don't go over fences. They make singles. They rarely make doubles. When you're disrupting yourself, you want to rethink your metrics. And if the conventional metrics don't apply, become your own Billy Beane and find the metrics that measure you. Fourth point. When you pursue a disruptive course, the odds of success will improve. In Professor Christensen's work, he did some extensive analysis of the disk drive industry, which is chronicled or recounted in The Innovator's Dilemma. What he found in this analysis, which is actually foundational to our investing, is that if you pursue growth via a new market as opposed to an established market, your odds of success are 6 times higher and your revenue opportunity 20 times greater. Let's go back very quickly to the Carlos Slim example. It's the mid-90s. You've got wireline penetration in Mexico of roughly 15%. And Carlos Slim decides, I think I'm going to go after the 85% that don't have wireline penetration. But I'm going to do it not by going on the high-end cellular. I'm going to do it by doing low-end, prepaid, subsidized cellular phones. And people are like, what are you talking about? It's 2002. I have a front row seat. I've just initiated coverage on America Millville. Penetration for wireless is already 25%. Wireline's still chugging along at 15%. 10 years later, well, almost 10 years later today, wireline's now at 18%, and wireless is at 85%. Translating that to ourselves, in wanting to build something, which was one of my metrics to success, or for success, didn't my odds improve when I was willing to become an entrepreneur? And in my wanting to actually write a book someday, didn't the odds that I could do that eventually improve when I was willing to start by writing a blog? One more thing I want to share with you, and that's where this 30 times comes in. We did some more analysis and looked at 40 companies that are ex-post disruptors, 10 years after the IPO, and looked at the multiple that they traded at, a trailing PE or price earnings multiple. What we found, it's 30 times, nearly double the market multiple. That's the kind of multiple that conventional analysis would say, you're out of your mind multiple. And yet, when you looked at the growth rate, the compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, over that same 10 years, it was 46%. So you look at the multiple of 30 times versus 46%, and in fact, the stock was a bargain. If you want to disrupt yourself, if you'll go to a place where no one else is playing or no one wants to play, your odds of success will improve significantly. Now, lest you think that my disruptive trajectory has been one straight up shot up the y-axis of success, let me tell you about one notable failure. 2008, we decided to back and launch a magazine. It was a very good idea at the time, and it got up to 100,000 in circulation, but eventually it failed. We lost a lot of money. It was a very, very expensive tutorial in startup investing. And I have to say, I'm a sadder but wiser girl, in the words of the Music Man. Here's what I want you to know. There are times in disrupting myself that I am lonely. I'm scared. I feel impoverished. And yet, I wouldn't do it any other way. Now let's talk about you. Are you ready to disrupt yourself? I have to wonder if many of you are here, in fact, today because there's some intuitive sense that you are ready to do that. You've heard many stories, and I suspect you've got ideas flooding at you, one or two maybe bubbling up, and as Malika said, and I would like to add my suggestion to hers, write those ideas down and commit yourself to act on at least one of them tomorrow, if not tonight. We give a lot of airtime to building and buying and investing in disruptive businesses. We should. Poverty levels are at their highest in decades. These are important engines of growth, but the most overlooked engine of growth is you. Jot down your ideas, act on them, innovate from the inside, disrupt yourself, and then we can really move the world forward. At that point, you'll no longer be trading at a discount. Your lives and your contributions will command the premium that they and you deserve. Thank you.